let me give you another tool that will help you unpack the Bible in a way you've never done before. And one of them is the idea of parallel timelines. And the reason I'm sharing this is because most people, when they approach the Bible, they assume that it's written and meant to be understood in a linear timeline. In the sense that there's one plot line that goes all the way through. But that is not the case. The Bible is more dynamic than that. You see, it is this understanding that makes us not understand certain aspects of Scripture that is meant to really give us an idea of who God is and what He does. Because in Genesis 37, Joseph is introduced and he is sold into slavery. And as we assume that the Bible is Genesis about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then Joseph, then the story should go from Joseph being sold into slavery straight to Joseph in Egypt. But Genesis 38, we see that the different plot line, different storyline comes up. And then in Genesis 39, that's when the story with Joseph picks up again. But if you look at the story of Genesis 38, there's no way that it could have happened in between Joseph's sale into slavery and his time in Egypt. No, that's not possible. The events that happen in Genesis 38 is so much longer than that. And what this means is that Genesis 38 is actually a parallel plot line that parallels Joseph's experience in Egypt. So Genesis 37 stops, Genesis 38 begins, and then Genesis 39 begins, and Joseph and Judah's storyline meets in Genesis 41. Let me try to explain that again. The story of Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38 parallels. It goes side by side at the same time with Joseph's time in Egypt. And this is very important. I'm not going to explain what that means, but I want you to study it out. I'll probably explain it in a future video. But I want you to think about that. If you see that as a parallel, how does that change the story? Another parallel that I think is very important is the parallel of Judges and Ruth. You see, I thought that Judges came and stopped at the end of Judges, and then Ruth began right afterwards. But when I looked at the story, I realized no, Ruth and Judges parallel each other. They go side by side. And this is very important because Judges showcase a nation who is completely lost. They're totally distracted and disobedient and reaping the results. They're about to go extinct. But in contrast to that, God showcases Ruth and her family and how they do their best to trust God and to obey Him. And as a result, God brings the greatest solution Israel needed at that time. And this is just two of the many parallels that exist in the Bible. But the parallels are there to let us know this one thing, and that is that God is working behind the scenes. You see, just because we don't know, just because our situation looks bad or hard or we feel terrible, we feel like everything's over, just because we feel that way doesn't mean that God has forsaken us. It doesn't mean that God has let go. No. These parallels tell us that even though we may feel like everything's falling apart, we may feel like nothing is working out, but we can be confident that God is working behind the scenes to fulfill His will. And so I can go on for a long time, but I want you to know this, that when you read the Bible, look for parallel timelines. And I promise you, it will add to your understanding. It will be more dynamic, and it will help you understand how God works or wants to work in your life.